This is the Imperator with today's game, a lesser-known title called Chaos Sector. Released in 2018, Chaos Sector was developed and published by Chaos Galaxy Studios, which is a one-man development studio, so please keep that in mind as you go through the game. It was made by a single individual. The only thing not made by the solo dev are the soundtrack, which is free-use music by a Japanese musician. I've placed a link to the YouTube channel of said musician, as well as a link to some of the songs that are used in the game in the description. The last thing is the translation, which was done for free by members of the community. Chaos Sector is a turn-based strategy game, heavily inspired by the early console strategy games like the Advance Wars series, Romance of the Kingdoms, Nobunaga's Ambition, and Super Robot Wars. The game is set in another galaxy, or perhaps a far-off future, where humanity has colonized space and built a large intergalactic empire. But all is not well. After a devastating alien invasion, and then a brutal revolt against the Empire, it seems to be on its last legs, when another alien fleet attacks the northern sector of the Empire, which is already being pillaged by pirates. This North Sky sector is where the game takes place. Chaos Sector has a total of 4 factions, though only 2 of them are playable, those being the North Sky Fleet and the MSG Pirates. In order to play as the pirates, you must first complete the game as the North Sky Fleet. Personally, I don't think this is something the developer needed to do. Though the pirate campaign is longer than the fleet one and has more enemies, I think we would have been fine letting the player choose. Maybe with a disclaimer that the pirate campaign is recommended for a second playthrough, not for the first. Chaos Galaxy's gameplay is split into 2 segments, the strategic layer and the tactical layer. Let's start with the strategic layer. Anyone who's played a Romance of the Kingdoms game will find this part a little familiar. When your turn begins, you're given the option of holding a session and listening to your officer's recommendations, or choosing what to do yourself. Even if you let your officers give recommendations, you can still choose to disregard their suggestions, but what choices are there? Starting from left to right, you have information. Here you can look at your officers, their stats and skills, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Second, you can view the map, look at the lay of the land, and see who controls what, as well as which enemy officers garrison which planets and the units they have under their command. Next, you have attack, which is pretty self-explanatory. You can choose which planet to attack based on the planets you currently control, having a connection to your target. Once you have selected a target, you then choose which officer you want to lead the attack, and which troops they take with them. Then we have planet. Here you can develop your planets and build forts. Developing planets will increase the income of the planet, though the game doesn't tell you how developing equates to income. In fact, there's no way to see your income other than ending your turn and seeing how your money increases. Forts are defensive structures that only appear when a planet is attacked. You can build a total of 9 of them per planet, and they are very useful in battle, but personally I don't bother investing the time and resources in them. I prefer to expand the fleet, which is our next option. Fleet allows you to both expand and shrink your forces, using money to buy new units or decommission existing units. Both factions have 6 units they can recruit, 2 mechanical units, a cruiser, battleship, submarine, and finally a supply ship. I'll talk more about the differences in units in the tactical section. Decommissioning units will give you money based on the cost of the unit, its rank, and for some reason higher ranking units give you more money when decommissioned than low ranking counterparts. I'm not really sure why. Maybe the equipment of an experienced unit sells for more than an untested unit? Next we have technology. Here you can research permanent passive buffs for your army. Unfortunately, the tech tree is the same for both factions, but as each faction favours different weapons, it makes sense to invest in different parts of the tree for each faction. For example, the North Sky Fleet has heavy use of beam weapons, so getting research that strengthens beam weapons is obviously worth it, whereas the pirates mainly use solid weapons, and so it would be better served investing in those solid weapons over beam ones. The other branches offer upgrades that are useful for both forces, such as the top tree, which increases the energy of your units, and the second to last tree, which increases the health of all units as well as melee damage. Our second to last option is Explore. You can send one of your officers to explore for 2 weeks. When they return, they will provide some kind of benefit. For example, they can research a tech, build forts, get units, develop planets, destroy enemy forts, or increase their stats, all for free, which is pretty nice. The main disadvantage is Explore is it takes a turn to start it, and the officer you send will be unavailable for 2 weeks. Personally, I didn't do any exploring in my playthrough, which didn't feel like a mistake, but getting technology for free would have been very nice. Finally, we have Sabotage. This lets you send an officer to attempt to destroy an enemy fort around a planet. Another move I didn't make use of, mainly because I ignore forts in battle, but that's just me. You can only take one of these actions a turn, and as the game has a turn limit of 50, it's a good idea to make proper use of your time, although I didn't feel any time pressure in my playthroughs. Even when I spent a lot of turns playing around, I still finished the game by turn 39. Now let's talk about officers, or commanders as the game likes to call them. Every single officer has a passive skill and an active skill. They then have 3 passive skills that are unlocked by gaining prestige. Prestige is basically levels. Anytime an officer does something, they gain prestige. Whether it's building a fort, developing a planet, or leading an attack, an officer gains prestige, and once they reach the required number, they unlock the passive skill. Unfortunately, it feels like you're encouraged to pick an officer early game who has the best passive and active skills, and use them to do everything so they gain prestige as fast as possible, in order to unlock those passives. As an example, I personally used the North Sky Fleet Commander and the Pirate Leader, because they both had passive skills I liked. Before we move on to tactical combat, I want to mention officer stats. They are prestige, leadership, and politics. I've already explained prestige, but leadership affects how many units an officer can lead in battle, how many forts they can build. It also decreases the cost of recruiting units. Politics, on the other hand, affects how much you develop a planet by, and it decreases the cost of researching technology. Now let's talk about battles. To start with, battles are always fought over a planet, with the defender having access to any forts that are built on the planet, as well as having the planet itself as a location that must be defended. In order to win, the attacker must destroy all enemies, not including forts, or capture the enemy planet. The defender, on the other hand, has to either defeat all the attackers or defend for 20 turns. Battlefields are vast expanses of space, but they do have some features that have an effect. For example, there are minor planets around the main planet that can be captured and occupied. When starting a turn on one of these planets, the unit will generate both health and energy. The other feature are asteroid belts. Ships can't fly through them, but mechanized infantry can. Being inside an asteroid belt also increases the dodge rate of units within, although it also increases energy consumption. Since I mentioned it, let's talk about energy and power. Power is essentially health, going down as a unit takes damage, or healing by standing on a planet. Health doesn't have an impact on ships. A ship at max health will perform the same as a ship on 1 health, but infantry are affected, as infantry are made up of 3 individual fighters, and as a unit's health declines, they die. This matters because infantry do damage based on the amount of fighters that are alive. For example, an infantry unit's weapon does 30 damage, all of its fighters alive, they'll do 30 per fighter, so 90. If it loses a fighter, it drops down to 60, and then 30 with its final fighter. This encourages trying to protect your infantry as they lose effectiveness as they take hits. Energy is the second stat units have, and in some ways it's more important than power. Everything a unit does costs energy. When they move, they spend energy. When they attack, they spend energy based on the weapon. When a unit runs out of energy, it loses the ability to both attack and even move, making energy consumption vital. Other than that, there are 3 other stats. Vision, how far a unit can see; move, how far a unit can move; and lead, which is how much leadership it costs to command. Now let's talk about individual units and their abilities. Both Pirates and Imperials have 2 infantry units, a range one and a melee one. Though they are the same kind of units, they do have differences. The Imperial melee unit, for example, has a shield that can absorb some of the damage they take in exchange for energy, whereas the range unit for the Empire uses a beam weapon that fires in a straight line. The Pirates use a solid weapon that can attack diagonally, but has less range. This sounds simple, but is very important to know in battle. After all, units that are attacked outside of their attack range can't counter-attack. For example, a pirate unit that can attack an Imperial one diagonally, with the Imperial one being unable to respond, while the Imperial unit can do the same to the pirate if it attacks at maximum range. Nearly all Imperial ships use beam weapons as their primary weapon, with only their cruisers and battleships having access to a solid weapon that can attack diagonally, in the form of a cannon, while for the pirates it's the opposite, with nearly all pirate ships having solid weapons in the form of missiles, with only the cruiser and battleship having beam weapons. Outside of all weapons, all these ships have abilities. Battleships have a shield that can fully block beam attacks in exchange for energy. Crews have a radar that they can activate to reveal more of the level, and hidden units. The hidden unit being the sub, which has the ability to hide in exchange for energy every turn they are hidden. If the unit steps on a square with a hidden unit, they skip their turn and get attacked by the hidden unit, which is then revealed. Infantry also have a unique ability, that being they can capture enemy units. The chance of capturing is based on the health of the unit, as well as any skills the commander have that influences capturing. While here I'll mention commanders. While they have passive abilities, they also have an active ability. Commanders have a bar that fills as units are destroyed, with it filling faster for commanders as they lose their own units. When it's full, they can activate their ability, whenever they please. While the AI tends to only activate their ability if it's useful for the situation, you can choose to activate it whenever you like. Some of these abilities can win a battle outright. For example, the pirate commander's ability lets her ships all attack twice in a turn. Another member of the pirate faction has an ability that lets her mind control all aliens in an area for 3 turns. The final units to mention are forts and supply ships. Forts are pretty simple, they can't move and can only attack units that enter their range. All forts use solid weapons, even Imperials and alien forts. The final unit in your roster is the humble supply ship. It has no weapons, but makes up for it for being able to transfer its vast supplies to other ships, ensuring they can keep fighting. Early game, you want a supply ship with you in every battle, until you've researched some upgrades that increase your unit's max supply. The other abilities the supply ship has is repair. There are status effects in this game, and a supply ship can fix them, although a supply ship can't heal units. Since I mentioned status effects, I'll now talk a little bit about aliens. Nearly all alien ships have a status effect, that being rot, which is a form of poison or acid that slowly kills your ships. It can kill them outright if a unit's health hits 0 from a status effect, they die. Alien themselves are vulnerable to a unique status effect that can only affect them. That be when attacked, an alien may randomly be affected by the crippled stat, which makes them unable to move, attack, or retaliate. But alien supply ships can remove this status effect on them, and unlike human supply ships, aliens can heal. They also tend to regenerate health every turn, and don't use energy. This makes finding them very different to humans, as they have abilities that counter many of the human weaknesses, but they do have one glaring weakness. All alien weapons bar forts, melee units, and a unique alien unit fire in a straight line, meaning weapons that can attack diagonally are very effective against aliens. The final thing to know about battles is the units take extra damage when attacked from the sides and back. They also can't retaliate against back attacks. which makes keeping your army together in a cohesive formation important, because the enemy AI won't hesitate to head behind your units and attack them unopposed. Other than that, units have experience and level up, although leveling up only increases their energy and power, not their damage. Finally, any damage a unit sustains in battle is healed afterwards, provided they survive the battle. The game begins with the North Sky fleet surrounding the Emshi pirates with the intent of destroying them once and for all. But then, from nowhere, a bunch of aliens show up and destroy most of the fleet, forcing them to retreat. In the chaos, the pirates slip away and the stage is set for the three-way conflict between them. After that, you get a Star Wars-esque text scroll telling you a bit about the setting. To paraphrase, in the year 1012, a massive alien invasion hit the Empire. In response, the Emperor took the Imperial fleet of 10,000 ships to face them. He won, but died in the fighting, losing around half of the fleet. Then, in 1018, the Tosha shogunate declared its independence from the weakened empire. In response, the Prime Minister sent 3 imperial fleets to defeat them. After 2 years, with little progress, the empire decided to make liberal use of nuclear weapons and destroyed all the worlds of the shogunate, destroying it and killing a lot of people. However, the army of the shogunate that was still deployed scattered and became the pirate forces, who in short term wished to take revenge on the empire and in the long term desired to rebuild their destroyed nation. Then we reach the current year, 1022. 10 years after the first alien invasion, a second one takes place, called the Second Alien Impact. Unfortunately, this intro is where the story largely stops. As the game is largely a sandbox, there are very few events that take place between the beginning and end of the game. The only thing that does happen is both factions will gain a 4th officer, with their own backstory and character, but that's a very small addition to the story. As I've said, there isn't much to talk about story-wise outside of the beginning and ending, so I will talk about the endings of the game. So this is your spoiler warning. If you don't want the game ending spoiled, please skip ahead to a later part of the video. In the description there are links to where the spoilers end. Alright, let's talk about the late game and endings. First of all, once you defeat the other human faction, you get a short event where the officers all die in the case of the pirates, or the commander dies while his officers flee in the case of the North Sky fleet. After that, once the aliens have lost all their territory, they will fall back to the gate connecting the sector to the rest of the empire. This is the final battle, and where you encounter the final boss, who is quite strong, but will probably go down a hail of beams or missiles depending on who you're playing it. Then the aliens will mourn the loss of their leader, retreat back into the void or wherever they came from, and if you're playing as the North Sky fleet, the game ends there. With the alien gone, the Imperial Navy is able to enter the sector. They take the North Sky Admiral into custody for misuse of Imperial funds to fight the aliens. He is found guilty, but due to his contribution against the aliens, he is allowed to retire and decides to become a teacher at the Imperial Academy. And the Empire continues limping forward, having survived this incident. It's not really a happy ending, but it's better than the bad ending for the Admiral, where he's outright executed for failing to defeat the aliens before the Imperial fleet arrives. Now let's talk about the pirates, as things play out a little differently. After defeating the final boss, the aliens retreat and the Imperial Navy enters the sector to find it under the control of the pirates. The War Minister asks the pirates to surrender peacefully, but they of course say no, and you're into the final section of the pirate campaign, where you have to fight a new enemy, the Imperial Crusade, who have a nice yellow colour. The Imperial Crusade largely has the same units as the North Sky fleet, but they have some new and very powerful commanders, plus perhaps the strongest unit in the game, the nuclear battleship. This ship fires a nuclear ball that does damages not just the unit it hits, but every unit around them, and sets them on fire, dealing passive damage every turn for 3 turns to each unit. This attack can't be dodged, or even counterattacked. Definitely a devastating attack, but at this point you probably have a very large military, income and treasury, and so can absorb the cost of losses this ship will inflict. After you defeat the Imperial Crusade, the War Minister retreats, abandoning those of his forces too damaged to move, and we see the ending of the pirate campaign. With the pirates in complete control of the North Sky sector, they recapture the old shogunate worlds and declare the founding of a new shogunate, the Sendai shogunate. This new country prepares to face off against the weakened empire for control of the galaxy, and that's the end of the pirates story. Let's start with the positives. I found the gameplay engaging. I was honestly a little surprised since I have played both Chaos Galaxy 1 and 2. I thought going back to Chaos Sector might be difficult, but it wasn't. The gameplay is still fun and holds up against its sequels. The game is rather simplistic, but I think that's more of a strength than a weakness. It's a simple game that you can easily learn the mechanics for, without being overwhelmed, and it's not so simplistic there's nothing to learn. I actually think the randomness of battles is good here. Only melee attacks have a 100% chance of hitting, so neither you nor the enemy can guarantee hits. I've had scenarios where the enemy has shot 50% shots and missed all of them, scenarios where I've missed 90% chance to hit shots. The fact that most status effects trigger randomly means you can't take things for granted in battle, encouraging keeping formation, bringing supply ships and fighting strategically instead of just charging in, even when you have a numerical advantage. You also have the option to skip in-battle fights, which is nice as they get a bit samey after a while. The game also has a gallery which lists all the officers and units that you've encountered, which is always nice. Finally, I will say I did quite enjoy the story and the characters. I quite like how both the pirates and the Imperial fleet are both morally grey, neither being truly good. The pirates are of course pirates, but they're justified in their actions, trying to take revenge for the destruction of their homeland and wanting to rebuild it, whereas the Imperial fleet wasn't involved in the destruction of their homeworld and is simply defending their own lands from the pirates' attacks. This helps make both factions feel believable. Neither is wholly good or wholly evil, so both are understandable. You could agree with either, or maybe even both of them. This helps keep the story grounded in realistic characters and factions. Now, moving on to things I didn't like. First of all, there are no hotkeys. The entire game is mouse-driven, which means a lot of clicking. At the very least, I would have liked the ability to hit spacebar to end turn or something similar. The translation for the game is also not great. It's passable, but nothing more. The sequels definitely have better translations than this. I also would have liked to play as the aliens. It's a pity you don't get to do so in this game. Finally, the biggest problem I have with this game is it's largely retconned and has no real bearing on the Chaos Galaxy universe and lore. A lot of the lore from this game is the same in Chaos Galaxy. The events of this game are non-canon. There is no alien invasion of the Null Skies sector in Chaos Galaxy 1, so there isn't much reason to play this game, as the sequels improve on the game's play and the story is not used for them. If you did decide to play Chaos Sector, it would be mainly to see where the Solarverse started and where the story began, than to see any sort of deep, original lore for the setting. One other minor thing, I saw quite a few people claim the game is brutally hard. Personally, I haven't experienced that, but it's something to keep in mind. Although I do play a lot of strategy games, so if I did encounter one that's brutally hard, I might not even notice. So, is this game worth playing? I would say yes. If you've listened to what I said about the game being made redundant by its sequels and are still interested, I don't see any reason not to play it. As I said, I've played the sequels and still enjoyed my time with this game, despite the fact they expand on the systems here in every way. Sometimes a simple experience can be appealing, and I think that applies here. For the price, I definitely think this game was worth it, that being just £8.50 or $10. It still goes on sale regularly. Just last month it fell to between £1 or £2, and for that price I would recommend it to even people who aren't fans of the genre. I will say, however, that this is a Steam-only title, so if you're not on GOG or Epic, you're out of luck in that regard. Thank you for watching my video. I think I'm getting into the groove of video making, so I hope to release more videos at a faster rate. We'll see how it goes, right? Will there be a video on Chaos Galaxy 1 and 2? Of course. Will there be a Kessen 2 video? Certainly. But not yet. For my next video, well, let me give you some hints. It'll be an XCOM-like game, but in real time. Feel free to guess in the comments. If you guess right, well, I'll acknowledge that, and I'll pin your comment or like it or whatever, and you can feel proud of your knowledge. And I will quietly seethe over you guessing correctly. But if you guess wrong, I'll smirk. I might even laugh, knowing that you failed to guess. It'll bring me immense mental pleasure. One guess per person, of course, and it's not XCOM Apocalypse. See you next time.